In 2005, two auction giants, Sotheby's and Christie's, competed for the chance to sell Maspero Denko's $20 million art collection. Maspero Denko's director, lil troll he is, didn't want to make the decision himself, so he would have the two companies compete for the collection by playing a little game: rock, paper, scissors. Given the weekend to decide their moves, the Christie's executives turned to their boss, who, completely unfamiliar with the playground meta, asks his 11-year-old daughters for advice. Their response? Play scissors. They believed most players defaulted to rock because everyone thought it was the strong option. So, smarter players, like the ones on Sotheby's, would know that and counter with paper, making scissors the winning option for this opponent. When the weekend finished and the moment arrived, both sides wrote down their moves. Christie's played scissors, and Sotheby's played paper. Christie's would get the $20 million art collection. They had picked right, and they had won. But how is that possible? How could two kids outsmart a team of adults? Was luck on their side, or was it all skill? Why do people even play rock paper scissors when they could seemingly lose to anyone? And most importantly, why is that so fun? Let's find out. Part 1. Luck and skill. Okay, just imagine a line, right? On one end is luck, on the other one is skill. Where here would you place rock, paper, scissors? Keep the answer in mind, we'll need it later. The way I see it, from a purely mechanic standpoint, rock, paper, scissors is a game of chance. There is a 1/3 chance of winning and a 1/3 chance of losing. From just the rules, it is basically choosing 4 numbers on a d6. 2s that would mean you win, and 2s that would mean you lose, and rolling the dice and seeing what comes up. This, I think, is the part of rock, paper, scissors that makes it the most balanced to the most amount of people. The fact that the rules make it seem like 1/3 of the time you win the game. Luck is one of the most interesting things about game design because of how polarizing it is. With games that require more luck, anyone can play and feel like they have a chance. A game like Snakes and Ladders becomes a game literally the entire family can play because of the fact that nothing you do matters. There's no mental edge. You can get over your freaking spoiled brat cousin Henry, who, if you could just hand him one L, maybe he would get humbled, but he's been rolling like hot shit the entire night. Maybe even just Satan himself has blessed him. I don't know. Sorry. Sorry. Okay, my bad. Basically, luck is the ultimate equalizer. The more luck there's in the game, the more fair it becomes for people, since their actions have less consequence and it's all up to fate. If that was the case, why don't people who prefer rock, paper, scissors just play heads or tails? If it's a game about pure luck, might as well cut out the middleman of a potential tie and get it over with. It is because of the other factor, the opponent. And the fact that when you're facing another living, breathing, flesh and blood human, you can convince yourself that there are patterns. That you can search for some tell and know, I know what you're about to pick. And that means I can win. And despite all of the luck, people can believe rock, paper, scissors has skill. Everyone knows the classic playground tricks. Calling your move, asking what starter Pokemon you picked, or the Ludwig classic.
Do you watch anime?
But how much skill does this game really have? A lot of studies have been done on how exactly we're supposed to win rock, paper, scissors. In a survey I found on the most trusted source, Reddit, we see that rock is people's first choice most of the time. Even if mechanically, rock, paper, scissors is a 1 in 3 chance of winning, realistically, there are some biases that people have. So, generally, you can win a little bit more by being aware of the data and statistics of people's tendencies. That I'm pretty sure is a skill. The best way I can explain it is how I view something like why poker takes skill. On a game-by-game basis, poker is a game about luck. Despite all the skill in the world, you cannot change what cards you're dealt. The skill in poker comes in 2 parts. First, the statistics. Knowing which cards are going to increase or decrease your chance of winning, and thus when to bow out to avoid a great loss, or when to go all in. That's making a good career of poker all about skill. This is not something we can relate one-to-one to rock, paper, scissors, but it's similar in the fact that we can excuse this seemingly random game because there is skill in knowing your opponent. The part we can relate to rock, paper, scissors is the pattern finding. In this game of luck, there is a skill in being able to read your opponents and find the pattern. Poker games take a while, so you have the ability to gather info about your opponents, their tics, their tendencies, learn how they play when they're up and when they lie, so that when you're looking down the barrel of the gun in the endgame, you can be slightly informed in your decision. An example of the combination of these 2 elements is this clip from the Poker World Series. Brandon Caputo has pocket aces, the strongest hand in the game. For the uninitiated, pocket aces gives you the highest chance of winning a game pre-flop. Flop is when the dealer puts the cards down on the table so that the cards in your hand can combo with the ones on the table, so yeah. Sitting against him is Harvey Matthews, and in his grip, almost the worst hand in the game, a 7 deuce. The 2 combine to have the most limited possibilities of combinations. This hand is only saved from being the worst hand in poker by the fact that it could also be a flush since the 2 cards share a suit. That's an extra few percentage in the tank, but not a lot of difference. It's the statistical best hand versus one of the worst ones. Lady Luck has decided who has her favor, now it's up to the humans to execute. For the skill section of the game, Caputo has the strongest hand in the game, and being down to only 1.8 million chips, he isn't doing too hot. He has to use his opportunity to get as much as he can because he has the strongest cards in the game. Matthews, on the other hand, is sitting on a cushy 9.3. He can take a few risks. So this will be relevant info for both sides because it will inform how the other wants to play. The bets rise, the cards flop, and people who don't want to play their hands drop out. The last two competitors standing strong. Now if we look at the table, there's a 3 and an 8 of diamonds. With 2 diamonds in his hand and 2 diamonds on the table, Matthews adds the possibility of a flush to his win conditions, which are the 2 other 2s for a triple, the 3 other 7s for the second double, and one of the other 9 diamonds for the flush. There's 1 card left on the river. Matthews thinks for a moment and figures he can take this gamble. His opponent surely thinks his cards in his hand are strong, because he's stuck around for this long. Given the fact that Matthews has way more chips than Caputo, he could raise the bet to an all-in here without risking too much of the cushion and potentially knock an opponent out if the cards fall right. He pauses, shoves his chips, and throws his cards out on the table. He's all in on the 7 deuce diamond, almost the weakest hand in poker. And I'm sure Matthews knows that by showing his hand, no poker player could refuse this. Caputo has stuck around this long. There is no way he'd fold a half-decent hand if these are the cards that he's presented with. Any sensible poker player will be willing to take this gamble. If Matthews has read the situation right, he knows that Caputo has a strong hand and he's laid his trap. Now all he has to do is wait and see if his opponent wants to gamble. Caputo sees this. With the cards on the table and the cards in his hand, he knows it's 70% favor for one of the best hands in poker. This is a shot you take every time. Caputo flips his cards and shoves all in. The odds are in his favor. But to Matthews, that's a 30% chance to knock his opponent out, and if that doesn't work out, he still has a cushion of 7.5 mil, while everything for Caputo rides on his bet. The river card turns, and while Caputo might have had her hand in the beginning, it seems that Lady Luck has given Matthews the last laugh.
Oh!
He does not.
It's like you knew. You said the backdoor diamonds, and Matthews makes the flush.
My experience with poker boils down to a few hands of Discord Poker Night, so I'm far too inexperienced to know the full intricacies of what went down here. But the way I see it, Matthews flopping his cards onto the table was a calculated risk. He has the worst cards in the game, but his opponent has less chips. He knows how humans work and decides on a ballsy play. Go all in now and test your luck. Let's see if you live or I knock you out. And it just so happens that sometimes, even with all the skill in the world, a plan can still come down to a little bit of luck. This to me is why I think a lot of people are okay with playing rock paper scissors. That despite the seemingly mounting RNG, there is a part of the game that you can predict, your opponent. Thus, your choices have agency. Like poker, you can wait, gather information, play the table, and eventually, once you've played enough games, you'll know how people tend to respond with situations like this. But at the end of the day, it is mostly luck. Luck that the calls you've made on your opponent are right. Or is it? Theory and practice. My favorite version of the rock paper scissors is skill argument is people training AI to win rock paper scissors. YouTuber Kush Gabuta made a video where he does this funny coding thing I can barely understand because I'm not smart, but he makes an AI that can learn a person's tendencies. Here's me trying to get a positive win rate versus his bot. In the beginning, it starts relatively close, but at some point, it just starts eclipsing me as it learns my patterns. You can try it yourself here. I'll put the link in the description. But anyway, look at Skynet Code taking my data. Yes, use my rock precision knowledge to oversee the government. Honestly, I'd take a evil robot overlord over some governments we have right now. But anyway, that just goes to show that eventually people have noble learnable patterns. Thus, the only time rock paper scissors leans more towards a skill game is if you have a metric shit ton of reps versus the other player and a bunch of other people. Because then you could have built up your info database and can predict the pattern. But we can extrapolate from this that the optimal way of playing rock paper scissors is to be truly random. A true random RPS gamer would eliminate the ability for your opponent to guess what you're about to do and ensure that you have at least a 33% win rate. For the rest of the video, I will be referring to the state of highest level as 20xx. This is a term that comes from the Super Smash Bros. Melee community that basically states that since Melee's by far best character is Fox, there will come a time in the future where humans are so advanced that we have perfected Melee to the point that the only option for both players is to play Fox, thus killing all the creativity and fun and the game as a whole. The only deciding factor being the fact that, for whatever reason, certain moves in Melee have port priority, meaning the only way to gain an advantage when Melee is played to perfection is by playing rock paper scissors to determine who gets the better port. So funny that it all loops back to RPS. But basically, 20xx is the theoretical peak a game can reach, with 2 players playing wholly optimally, and what the effects of that would be. While the 20xx version of rock paper scissors wouldn't kill the game, it would make it extremely less interesting. It would reduce it down to the pure luck-based state that we discussed earlier, which is not as satisfying to play. If 2 perfect players played against each other, both equally perfect at being able to memorize and detect patterns, the best strategy is to be truly unpredictable and random. And that's Practically, however, this couldn't be the case. First, as said, humans can't be true random. Usually people will default to a pattern, but that's not an argument I need with the game design. The second one is, let's be very generous and say that the average rock paper scissors game is like 3 turns. So in a best of 1 game, it is almost impossible to truly understand your opponent's pattern. It's why I think people who prefer RPS over more luck-based systems prefer picking a like best of 3 or best of 5 format. This allows for more skill-based gameplay because you can get more knowledge. That being said, I don't think human patterns appear early enough for skill to actually come into play. An AI is trained on infinitely more situations than the average rock paper scissors game lasts. The ability to hard read an RPS within the first 15 rounds is little more than a slightly informed gamble. Sure, you could say people, as in the entire population, have certain biases, but how would you gain that information without playing a bunch of games versus the general population of the opponent you're going to play against? And how could you be sure your opponent would follow the same system? Basically, unlike poker or chess, there is no optimal rock paper scissors theory because of the fact it is so random. My point is, on the luck and skill scale, no matter what, RPS will rest right here. Not entirely purely luck, but nowhere near as much skill as claimed. The skill portion of the game is simply impossible to gain on a game-by-game basis. Now you might argue, oh, but you said on a game-by-game basis, poker is luck, but as a career, it's skill. Okay, listen here. The story I told earlier, sure, was one of the examples where you have to rely on luck. That sometimes you can make suboptimal decisions to bait an opponent in and knock them out, but that the plan needs a little luck. But there was a lot of social engineering and risk-reward calculation that went into that plan. RPS can simply never reach the amount of information gathered as poker. In poker, you don't lose once you bow out of a bad hand. Sure, you might lose a few chips, but in return, good poker players can still gain info from every loss. And there are a lot more losses in a poker game than there are in an RPS game. Rock, paper, scissors will simply never reach the same volume needed to gain the pattern because there are so little rounds in RPS. And learning isn't transferable match by match. In poker, there are more optimal hands to play and situations that guarantee you can look and see the mathematically better option to pick. RPS has no way to be optimal. You cannot engineer a situation that any educated player would look and go, ah yes, the optimal move here is actually scissors, because of the fact that the optimal way to play RPS is pure RNG. There is no social engineering, there's just hoping you've gotten the pattern down and hoping your mix-up is correct. So while theoretically RPS can be a skill game in very specific circumstance, at both optimal level and practical level, RPS is more guesswork than skill. And it is that system that makes RPS the most accessible and seemingly acceptable game. The fact that there isn't enough skill so that an experienced player is an unfair match against a new player means that everyone can feel like they have a decent chance at winning this game. But someone who is more experienced can believe, or maybe they just might actually have the tiniest bit more percent chance of winning because of the data they've collected. And that is seemingly enough for players to be satisfied with playing it because it feels like they have agency. When there is even a slight factor you can predict, that is enough to seem like it's fair. And that's all any gamer really needs. The ability to feel like their choices matter. Yet, for a game that seemingly has everything, easy to pick up, perfectly balanced, replayable, RPS isn't a game that you see a lot of people playing as their like favorite game. Okay, I know you could probably just came up with like a million reasons as to why that's the case, and they seem super obvious, but this is my potential video essay, so I'm about to say something stupid. And if you just hold on to those thoughts, I'm sure you agree with me that looking at the successes and especially the shortcomings of rock, paper, scissors, we can see what makes games, like every type of game, fun. Just hear me out, okay? Part 2. Game mechanics. Talk a little bit more about agency. It's how much a player's decision matters in winning the game. Every game has a little bit of agency. Even just deciding to sit down and play the game is a player executing their agency. It, to me, is part of what makes games fun. You want to know that you had a hand in winning the game. So you can probably see how on the luck to skill scale, the more luck a game has, the less agency can be allowed. For now, I'd like to talk about how games can trick you into thinking you have any agency at all. So rock, paper, scissors design is usually cited in discussions about games balance to mean a system that has elements that serve as counters to other elements in the game. Think a system like Pokemon that is a very extensive tree of checks and balances, or a very reduced view of the MOBA or hero shooter genre. DPS, tank, and assassins. DPS deal a lot of damage consistently over time, so they counter tanks. But they're balanced by the fact that they don't take a lot of damage to kill, so they can be easily killed by assassins, who deal a lot of damage in a burst, thus neutralizing the DPS's ability to, do damage per second. But assassins are a class that is centered around burst, which means tanks who generally are designed to not be burst down will win against assassins. This is by no means how these games exactly play, and we'll get to that eventually, but You see what I mean with rock, paper, scissors as a reference for balance design. The characters in the system serve as checks for each other, but that also means you choosing what class you want to play is you executing your agency because it determines the kind of playstyle that you will have. But I'd also like to say that rock, paper, scissors is a balanced game for all of its systems, not just the fact that every move in rock, paper, scissors has clear strengths and weaknesses, but also the fact that the system lets you believe that there is skill. Games have to work very hard to be balanced, and to me, it leaves rock, paper, scissors as sort of an anomaly. Despite the fact that it has such high luck factor, the reason why people can still play this game and be generally satisfied with the outcome is because they believe that they have agency and thus skill. As we've discussed, the practical and optimal sides of RPS are pure luck, but the in-between of that is skill. If you somehow have enough reps against an opponent and you know their pattern, then there is agency. The choices you make matter because you somewhat have the ability to dictate the outcome of the game if you've read your opponent right.
Making a game that is mostly luck satisfying to play because you feel like you have agency.
But let's take a look at how other games on the spectrum handle agency. Games that are no debate as to how balanced they are usually reside on the very ends of the spectrum. As we've discussed, games that are pure luck are very balanced because anyone can play and everyone has an equal chance of success because there are no outside factors to affect winning. Games like slots or heads or tails, anyone can jump in and play. As such, the more luck a game has, the easier it is to get people to play the game as you can convince them that they have a chance at winning, thus your game can attract a wider audience. Obviously, the cost of this is how much agency a player has, because more keen eyes might be dissuaded from playing the game because they're aware of how volatile their chances of winning are. Basically, you just repel the sweaty gamers. Pure skill games on the other hand are games where winning is determined by how good or bad at the game you are, how much you know, how much you're capable of executing, basically how much is a game you can control to push towards your favor. These games are where even if luck is a factor, there is skill in when to buy into it and when to mitigate the need for luck. To put it into other terms, the power fantasy of a skill-based game is the fact that you have all the agency. If you are directly better than your opponent, if you practiced more, studied harder, grinded the game out, you will win more of the time because you are just better. As such, pure skill games tend to be harder to get into, thus alienating more casual gamers because it's just generally not fun to get ass railed while you're learning a game. But the payoff for this is the fact that you give the players the ultimate amount of agency. The fact that it is just the player and their skill that determines the victor is immensely satisfying for people who enjoy learning about systems and maximizing their gains. But a funny thing about pure skill games is the fact that they're just puzzles. You might have someone competing against you to solve the puzzle, but they're still just puzzles nonetheless. And sometimes, when a game has no RNG, its most optimal moves can be calculatable, and thus the puzzle is solvable. This results in what we call a solved game. A solved game is a game where the optimal endpoint has been mathematically calculated. Thus, given optimal play from both sides, at some point a certain outcome will always occur. There are games that have been solved that are far too complicated for me to explain shortly. Like, did you know given perfect play from both sides, the player who goes first in Connect 4 will always win? So given the highest level of gameplay, Connect 4 can conceivably reach 20xx, where once again, we play a whole other game to determine who goes first and thus wins. Now I can't fully explain the Connect 4 one because I can barely understand its win states, so let's set up for a game that's easier to understand. Tic-tac-toe. When played optimally by both sides, this game will always result in a draw. The player going first will usually dictate the pace in the beginning, as the first player is the one who decides the game is in a play-to-win state for the second player. The first player should always try to set up this like half-X thing because it gives them two sides to win on. But with how tic-tac-toe works, the second player can always stop that plan. Optimally played, the second player must always take the defensive option and aim for a tie or else risk opening themselves up for a loss. It'd be very hard for me to tell you every draw state, but from what I understand, as long as one player controls the middle in the first two moves, the game's most optimal line is to be a draw. Thus, either player can force a draw from the first turn given perfect play. Now you might say, oh Hearthstone, you've been saying a perfect play is only for computers. It's tic-tac-toe guys, you only need like an average level of foresight to keep forcing out the draw state, and while this is a pure skill game, that to me is innately unsatisfying because of the fact that when playing optimally, winning is impossible. There's just something unsatisfying about a game that when you master it, you just can't end up winning. In a grander scale, if tic-tac-toe someone became the biggest sport in the world, you would find even mid-level players complaining about how they can only determine a winner by someone else like passing out when they reach their human limit because of lack of sleep. Because tic-tac-toe isn't complicated enough to fuck up consistently. These types of games are perhaps more innately unsatisfying than a full luck game or even rock paper scissors because of the lack of agency. A solved game is only truly a game if both players are playing so optimally. As long as at least one player knows the optimal line, it is no longer a fun test. Innately, I think games are fun because we know we could lose. Not from the other player fucking up, but from the other player forcing us into a bad position. There is no tension, and thus no satisfying conclusion if a game's victor can be decided from the get-go. When a game involves more skill, the power fantasy is usually the person who has more time invested in the game will win more. You want your hard work to be rewarded by the ability to force situations where you have control and thus you're able to win more games. So to me, A game that is solvable is a fail in game design simply because its endings are predestined, thus unsatisfying, so they're unfun to compete for. And you might be saying, but is human error not what make rock paper scissors an acceptable game? People are okay with rock paper scissors because it is humanly impossible to be truly random. But then shouldn't tic-tac-toe be more fun for people who enjoy skill-based games, since if you're just better for longer than your opponent, you will win? I mean, like, sure, but I think it's leaving out a few details. People like skill-based games because they have an edge and guarantees that they will win. In RPS, if you believe you have the human pattern downloaded, you believe you have an edge that guarantees the win. Tic-tac-toe, on the other hand, the only thing you can guarantee is the fact that you don't lose. It is fully up to your opponent to make a mistake. The maximum amount of agency you can have is not losing, but human beings want to be playing to win. What I'm saying is, games where at the peak of their performance, both competitors cannot make situations where they are leading to a win aren't fun, because you can only fully exercise half of your agency. People like being able to solve the puzzle, sure, but the way to make that even harder and even less solvable
is to increase its complexity.
The more complex the game is, the more skill it takes. With multiple decisions and thus branching outcomes, the player feels like they have the most amount of agency because of the infinite amount of moves that they can make. This isn't to say that a complex game moves the game more towards skill on the luck and skill scale, but it is to say that the things you have to master about the game are very different. A game like Battleship might seem full RNG reliant, as it relies on guessing where an opponent has placed their ships. But by keeping track of the ships you have destroyed and efficiently spacing out your shots, you can actually start making more efficient guesses, thus mitigating the chances that you'll miss. See, since the smallest ship is 2 squares long, you should start shooting in a checkerboard bat. But after that one is sunk, you only need to shoot every 3 squares.
Now if they're still on the board, the only ones that would be left would be the ones that are 4 long, so
you need to only shoot every 4 squares. See, luck mitigation. This is a game that seems to rely on luck, that people will feel more okay with getting into it, but sweatier gamers can have an advantage. Thus, the agency of buying into or not considering luck is just a factor. Technically, you could play suboptimally and just get very lucky and win, or you could play optimally and have a higher chance at winning.
Choosing what kind of gameplay you want to engage with is a form of agency.
To move a bit up the scale, we have TCGs. To me, I'd put TCGs on the scale here. It takes a lot of skill to pilot a deck well, knowing what cards are best for what situations and what your win conditions are. While it is true that there is certain luck involved sometimes in drawing cards, there's an immense amount of skill that needs to go into assembling your deck so that it becomes as consistent as possible and leaving less room for chance. But on the end of the spectrum, there are games like chess, games where there is no luck, and the moves you make are the only determining factor to your victory. In chess, you and your opponent are the only 2 people who decides who wins this match. A player can study theory to increase their odds of victory, but it doesn't mean every game will go that way. The ability to think on your feet when your opponent deviates from predicted theory is also a much needed skill. Even with just the more optimal leaning moves on a board, there are so many different states a chessboard can be in because there are so many paths to victory, thus the optimal beginning line is very unclear. So much so that not even your best computers can truly solve chess, so there might never even be a state of 20xx in the game. Now you might then raise the point of chess bots, and you would be correct. A chess bot would tell players what moves are more likely to lead to them winning, but that doesn't mean chess is solved because there are so many different ways to get towards winning. So while you can play the optimal line, there is still the ability to choose which lines you want to take.
I don't know what's going on. I'm just gonna castle. I don't want to think too much.
It's also the case that, unlike tic-tac-toe, chess is so insanely complicated that outside of endgames where there are limited pieces, it is genuinely humanly impossible to keep finding the most optimal line in every situation. So, chess is an interesting game because it is the epitome of everything that makes a full-scale game fun, while also staying very balanced. The more work you put in, the better you become, thus the more games you'll win. Like poker, you can properly lay traps or anticipate what an opponent will do because chess theory is so well documented, you can predict what move your opponent will make and plan around it. And most importantly, every player has the same resource. Just like RPS, the players have the exact same set of tools at their disposal, so there's no excuse either player can make but the fact that their opponent was just better or that they themselves made more mistakes. As such, the seemingly infinite amount of possibilities in chess let the players feel the most amount of agency. Technically, you can make any move you want, suboptimal or not, and you know that each move you make is a great part of the reason why you succeed or fail. Now, I said almost no luck, but there are things that maybe you would consider luck in every game. There's some evidence that in chess, the person who gets white thus the first move has an advantage because they get to set the tempo of the game. And if you look at the tournament win rate percentage of white, it comes out ahead. So I guess RNG of who goes first does have a slight advantage. But I don't think that's actually luck. I think it's only luck in appearance, and I think my next point will help illustrate that. I find the concept of wishing people about to compete in a high skill activity good luck really weird. This concept is easier for me to explain in sport, so so forgive me if I deviate for a bit. If you need luck to win a game as high skill as basketball, then it probably means that you just weren't good enough, that you haven't practiced enough to rebound or shoot consistently, or basically just secure the win in the first place. And at that point, how satisfying is the win? I find this kind of interesting because some people enjoy watching sports because it is statistics in motion. Shooting percentages, win rates, efficiency, terms that get more and more vague for the uninitiated, but to those dialed in, these are very relevant stats. And if you look at it, you can almost see it as a dice roll, as luck. But to me, there is no luck in taking a suboptimal shot and missing. For instance, there's a story from Shane Battier who recounts his story of the strategy he employed while defending one of the most legendary scorers in all of NBA, Kobe Bryant. He figured that Kobe's statistically worst shot was off the bounce. He says Kobe was a 42% average to make the shot, which is below league average. So, he would constantly try to get Kobe to make the shot. The way analytics would like to see this shot is a bad gamble. But the way I see it, this is a human who can choose to mitigate his weakness and improve his strengths through constant practice. If someone knows they have a skill gap, that will only remain a problem if they don't take the time to work on it or take the time to avoid it. So them missing the shot isn't you getting lucky. It's them not taking the time to work on it. There is no luck in the skill issue. That's not even taking into account how Shane forces Kobe into the position to take these shots. Usually, defenders will just put their bodies in a way to block a player from getting to their spot, but this is very rehearsed, and proper counters to this strategy can be employed. So, Shane found a more consistent way to make Kobe take the shot. To the uninitiated, it just looks like he's sticking his hand in Kobe's face to make it harder for him to see and just shoot. But Kobe is notoriously one of the most ego-driven players. What Shane did was put his hand in front of Kobe's face whenever he was in a position to take the shot off the bounce. To most players, this is an annoyance. But to Kobe, this is a challenge. It's someone saying, hey, you can make the shot when I do this annoying shit. And Kobe never backed down for a challenge. So, the Black Mamba, knowing full well what Shane was trying to do, does it anyway. Once again, this is everything we've talked about. Here's an opponent that you can psychologically read and assume how they will react to a situation because their personality is so obvious. The trap is set, and the opponent has fallen for it. This situation is the ultimate act of agency from both sides. By doing these actions, you bait your opponent into taking a suboptimal shot, and Kobe taking the bad shot is him expressing his agency over the game. It is him saying, this is how I want to play, even if it is worse, because I want to prove that your type of defense doesn't matter. A suboptimal shot hitting isn't luck if it is a practiced motion. It is a lot easier to see a pattern in a game like basketball because the amount of shots you have to make in a game. So statistics of what becomes optimal is clear, but that isn't the role of a dice. This is the human limit. How often this particular human body succeeds at the task at hand. But that number is raised and lowered by how much practice the human wants to put in. What is optimal changes from person to person based on their skill set. Even if there are suboptimal shots that are statistically unlikely, we only know that because of what humans are capable of, and that crafts what is unlikely in sports. What is likely is the results of hundreds of hours of work to become good enough to make your shot consistent. There is no luck in hitting a shot you've worked your entire life to perfect. And to me, if you miss, that's just something you haven't worked on. Okay, so how does it relate to chess and like skill games in general? The luck, I suppose, is being in the right position at the right time to capitalize on when an opponent messes up. But to be able to set up these situations and or to capitalize on them takes skill. The difference between tic-tac-toe and chess is in chess you can force your opponent to be quote unlucky by putting them into situations that are hard to think their way out of. This is how allegedly the current best chess player in the world, Magnus Carlsen, likes to play. He knows he is so much better than his opponents at thinking his way out that he just plays off the book openings that aren't optimal but that do force his opponents out of the studied chess theory. This is a situation of forcing your opponent to make a mistake, which some people might call being lucky or unlucky depending on your point of view. And an opponent making a mistake some people might call lucky because you get to have another chance. But the way I see it, there are no flukes in a pure skill game. It is just something that the enemy didn't practice enough for. But the ability to create and maximize these situations are all skill. So basically, it's just a bunch of skill checks and skill issues. So what am I saying? Well, that was more to just get the fact that don't tell people who have practiced all their lives good luck before a game, because if they practice hard enough, they won't need luck. But what I would like to highlight is how from this weird lens, rock, paper, scissors and chess are so similar but so different. Rock, paper, scissors will never be as complex as chess. But these are two games that give both players the exact same resources but take very different paths to make the games balanced. Rock, paper, scissors does it with luck, and chess does it with skill. Both games, however, have some misconception. For rock, paper, scissors, it's that it has a large percentage of skill, and chess, or any skill game for that matter, it is the fact that you can get lucky. luck in a skilled game is just an element that you can control or create. If a game is anywhere above halfway on the scale, luck is just another factor of the game that you can master. And ultimately, it shows us just how important a player's agency is over the game, even if there's just a little bit of skill. And most of the game is luck, the more the player believes that the choices they make matter, the more they will be willing to play the game. In both games, a win is satisfying because there is a conclusion that doesn't feel cheap because of the expectation of the game. One is skill and the other luck. These two stand to me at the apex of balance, yet I find that to design a game like either of these in today's age of gaming would have its problems. Part 3. Modern gaming. Imagine a game where there are 3 characters, okay? And now your job is to just pick one that you find the coolest, just from what I described, right? Okay, here we go. The first, a great warrior, his body cut and scarred as he fought to climb his way out of hell. The rage of survival has overtaken him and his determined to live is only matched by the fire of his strength. The next, a knight, raised in the great halls, the child of a king, but only by blood and not by name. Unlike the rest of their siblings, they didn't inherit their father's strength, yet they yearned to climb the ranks of battle. Adapting a faster fight style, they sprint and soar across the battlefield, all in hopes that one day their father might grant them the title of his true child. The last, a sickly figure, not anywhere near as gifted physically as the others, but rumor has it his mind is from the gods. His inventions far surpassing the current state of technology, with some even claiming it to be magic. But the inventor knows the truth. They are a frail human in a suit of iron forged from their thin hands and brilliant mind, and they are here to prove that they can fight. Now, humor me for a second and imagine in this hypothetical game, its mechanics were really fun. Good movement, fun, satisfying combat, deep, complex combos, and kit synergies, all the gaming buzzwords basically. But the characters were built in such a way that they countered each other like this. The Hell Warrior always beats the Knight because they can tank the damage despite the dashes. The Inventor always beats the Hell Warrior because they have range and Hell Warrior has no anti-CC. And the Knight always beats the Inventor because of mobility and being able to DPS down all the inventions. And then if there was like a mirror match, you just sit in the fighting pit slapping each other until, the timer runs out or something. If you felt any pull towards any of those characters, congratulations, you picked your main. And now you know which characters you love and hate facing because it's impossible to not win or lose. Would you even play that game? I bet not. Because I think even if everything else was fun, just the bare fact that the characters cannot win certain matchups will be bullshit. Because that is not the expectation that people want from their games nowadays. That despite all the skill you put in on one character, a complete noob can just waltz in and beat you. But that's how it feels sometimes, doesn't it? This, while a balanced game, is not going to be a satisfying experience. I really do think, even with the most fun mechanics, characters that interact in this RPS way are not fun. Why? As said, you want to believe your choices matter, and picking a character is one of the biggest acts of agency a player can do in modern hero titles. But there's also the fact that these games are skill games. So how do we design characters that counter each other, but still feel like there's a way around those counters so that people can express their skill? That, I think, is the root of hero design and the fundamental problem some players have with it. There are 2 reasons why people play these hero games. Either they like the characters, or they like the mechanics of the game. But if a system speak, like the one we just described, has fun heroes and everything, but the maximum skill you can get is just guessing, then that feels bad for people who want to get into either of those things. And so we have arrived at modern design. While characters can be built to be counters to another, the systems we currently play in are only feasible because there is some level of counterplay. The way I see it, in the simplest, most reduced terms, modern hero design is centered around the fact that each character has some level of rock, paper, and scissors. A character has matchups that they are more or less favored in because that makes it balanced. If a character's main stat is rock, then it should generally have a harder time with characters whose main stat is paper. But if a rock-based character has any amount of scissors, a skilled player can match that aspect of the character and give themselves a fighting chance in bad match. Now, the gamers like to complain a lot, and while I think some complaints are fair, I think a lot of discussion is generally just a skill issue, and all of it has to do with feeling like your choices matter and having satisfying agency over the game. So let's talk about our 2 problems, starting with my character sucks. This argument is when your character is somewhere between it's okay to complete utter dog shit. This might have come as a result of nerfs, power creep from other character designs, or just you feeling like your character sucks in general. Basically, your character doesn't feel as good to play as before. This is for a section of gamers that derive a lot of their enjoyment from the characters that they play. The mains, or better yet, the one-tricks who view the game from the lens of their characters only. That isn't an invalid way to enjoy the game. In fact, I think having a main that you enjoy is the expected way to enjoy a hero game. And when your character gets nerfed or becomes obsolete, that hurts. For people who don't touch hero games with a 10-foot pole, which is fair enough, imagine if they added someone like a paladin, who is basically just the warrior but with more scissors, or they thought warrior was too strong and they lowered his rock value, so sometimes he loses to like knight. This is how it goes. The rock paper scissors dynamic of a game is shifted in some way and it makes your character worse. But as usual, that's only talking about them through the lens of their statistical strength. Once again, there's a complete other facet we're disregarding, and that is the fact that these games are skill games. Yes, sure, your character is for whatever reason weaker, but that just means you have to get that much better to make it work. There are mechanics of the game you'll have to squeeze out more, movement you're gonna have to learn, different builds you're gonna have to adapt to, or you're just gonna have to push the game to its limit. But at the end of the day, I genuinely don't think there's a hero that you can't take to the top 1% of the player base if you're good enough. You can look it up for your favorite game of choice, but I checked for League and I'm 100% sure there's a one trick for every champ that is at least master tier. Because I think hero design has gotten good enough in the last few years that climbing with a shit character is just a skill issue. Essentially, I think the problem here is when you feel like you have less agency for having picked a certain character. This isn't incorrect if they're weaker now. If your character used to be really strong, but now they're not, you will feel like you have less agency. Especially when you have all these fancy new champions doing their like 10 million dashes and their tank being a bruiser and one-shotting you, and like, why does Cassandre have this much? Okay, sorry. I also do think that it should be considered that new characters being added to the game are fun. Everyone loves a good Smash Bros character announcement. That's how you get player engagement. To most hero games, a new hero is a fresh experience in the game, giving players in a certain role a new way to experience both play and counterplay. It is fun to experience and figure out a new puzzle piece. It just so happens that the more characters a game has, the more fresh a design has to be, and the more the designers figure out which characters people find fun to play. To borrow a term from Riot August, they all have some ability where you go, why the fuck can they do that? Because that makes their designs unique. Take something like Reinhardt's shield. Why the fuck does this guy just get a shield that blocks all of my projectiles? Isn't that a little bit bullshit? But that to me is what makes Reinhardt fucking cool. It's a big ass shield. Who doesn't think that's cool? You're the tank that guards his team. It's such a power fantasy. I see a lot of people complaining that Mel from Arcane, who has recently been added to League, her W is a spell that reflects all projectiles thrown at her back to the caster. So you would see why some people think that's bullshit. But I actually think the spell is, well, okay, maybe a little bullshit, but that's fair enough bullshit. Not that bad. It has a certain things that it can counter. But like this clip of a Briar ulting Mel. When a Briar ults an opponent, Briar herself gets flown at the target. So you can see how Mel, a ranged, squishy mage, wouldn't want to reflect a Briar ult and risk getting thrown at the Briar. There are very interesting counterplay and power fantasy options at play here, and that to me is good design. But you could also see how a champion like Morgana, whose shield ability only stops CC or magic damage, feels like they're getting left behind by these newer characters. And I think to the players of these left behind champions, it can feel like luck. In MOBAs where you can't have overlapping picks, and when someone gets to pick that OP champ in your role, you feel like you've already lost. The feeling I think is similar to a solved game. The outcome has already been decided because the enemy's pick is just so overwhelmingly better than yours. But as a player, I think you have to make the decision of, are you sticking with the characters that you like, or are you moving on and finding a counter pick to this OP piece of shit? Either way, you're gonna have to find a way for your pieces of the puzzle to counter theirs. I think the expectation of the player base is that they'll be safe, that one day their favorite character will just get a buff and they'll return to their former glory, or that OP pick, broken shithead piece of crap will just get nerfed. But that, I think, is luck. Obviously not luck because buffs and nerfs are systems that devs control, but anyway, you little person generally can't decide whether or not your silly little lad gets a positive change. What you can control is how good you are. Yes, I know it's frustrating to know that your character could do more, or once upon a time they were doing more. But the way I see it, you have to decide if you like the character or the game. If you prefer winning, you're gonna have to just play less of your main and really learn the game systems and winning matchups. But if the only reason you're even in this game in the first place is to play the character that you love, that little bit of scissors or rock or paper in the hands of an excellent player can be the world of a difference. The only question is, are you willing to lose more to get good at your character? Because you're gonna have to put in a lot more work to make your bad character work. Basically, you have agency over your choices, and picking the bad character you like is a choice. It's basically like a difficulty slider. Some characters that are broken are on easy mode, and other characters that take more time to learn or are just weaker are hard mode. If you are okay with playing hard mode, then go right ahead. You know that the path in front of you is going to be difficult, but if you love the character enough, you can get the skill to make it work. The next problem is the meta sucks. This is more a problem for multiplayer games than it is 1v1 focused games, but usually, developers will try to keep a game interesting by not just shifting champion stats, but how the game itself works. You see this mostly in MOBAs where they make changes to spice up the game. My favorite example of this is when Riot made changes to the rune system and added the perfect timing rune, which cooked the entire Assassin player base's enjoyment of the game. So this rune basically gave everyone a free use of the Zhonya's effect. In this state, a champion is invulnerable and cannot be targeted by abilities. So assassins, who need gold and thus they need kills, lost a kill window because they are all burst heavy champions. And when there's an effect that just lets you avoid an assassin's kill window by becoming invulnerable from a free rune, that means an assassin just loses that ability to get ahead. And this rune was so efficient and you could just sell the item afterwards, everyone took it. Not just to counterplay assassins, but because it was basically a get out of jail free card. But it did hurt assassins the most. So much so that Ella Stylish, one of League's biggest Zed OTPs, was so frustrated playing against this rune that he cites it as one of the points why he stopped streaming in the first place. Imagine that. One item in the game is so aggravating, it makes a guy quit his job. That's crazy. So obviously, everybody was frustrated by this rune, so Riot removed it. But then there are cases where it's not something the developers directly put into the game, but the fact that optimization always finds a way. As said, people like having agency and picking their characters, and obviously finding a combo of characters that works well together is a great amount of agency and thus fun for the players. And usually the point of skill-based games, because people want the most efficient ways to win the game, right? And so usually that's how metas are formed. Now metas aren't necessarily a bad thing, but sometimes they can be quite boring for the game. The best example of this to me is Overwatch's GOAT meta. A comp that had 3 tanks and 3 healers became the best comp in the game. Thus, fights were just a wet noodle slap fest of tanks brawling it out and supports pocketing them. Was it fun? I guess it could have been. Certainly for the players who play tank for the power fantasy of being a big beef ball, hitting the shit out of the opponent and not dying, this meta could have been fun for you. But the price of this is that there's a whole class of characters that are just suboptimal. This meta made it seem like the entire DPS roster was just irrelevant, which negated a whole class of players who just wanted to play that role. And we know how skill games are. There are people who enjoy it because of the ability to make optimizations, and it just so happens if you're playing a ranked game or against a team sweating their balls off in a normal game, this is what you had to do to win. So if you wanted to play your funny DPS character, you just felt like that wasn't an option. And that is not good for a player base. This got so bad that the devs had to be like, alright, let's step in and do something about this. They made Overwatch what it is today. The 2-2-2 roll-up, so no one could play this disgusting comp again. This kind of meta is once again seemingly similar to the solved game problem, but it doesn't instantly decide the winner. Yes, it does remove some of the agency of creativity and may seem like you're just waiting for the other player to make a mistake. But modern games are very complex skill games. This isn't symbols getting placed down, this is a team of players having to be coordinated and having to use their mechanics to win. There is so much more space for human error in these games because of how complex they are. And if it's a game where you can play the same comp, is that not exactly what chess or rock paper scissors is? Two teams who have the exact same resources, and all that matters is how much better you can be than your opponent? But I do understand how, even if it is a skill game, the fact that the meta doesn't fall in your favor is unlucky. You as a player have no way to influence who gets buffed or nerfed. And because of that, I think it's fair enough to complain about a meta that sticks around for too long. The way most hero games patches are designed is to somehow keep the game interesting, be it trying to keep every character's win rate balanced, or by making meta so that the cast of characters shifts every season. The only issue is the fact that since the developers are constantly trying to keep the game fresh, systems are constantly being changed in ways players have no control over, and that to me is what I think makes it so frustrating. You want to feel like the time you put into the game matters, but when your character just gets randomly nerfed, you feel like you've been punished for playing the game the right way. One of the problems with these games is that they're simultaneously being balanced for both extremely competitive gamers, since ranked is one of the main ways to keep players playing your game, but also casual gamers who might just enjoy a certain character or a certain playstyle and not care too much about mastering the whole game as a system. This results in a situation where people aren't necessarily putting in the effort to either learn the game or master their character, and thus they will get frustrated because they are not succeeding, exasperated by the fact that the natural course of competitive gamers is the path of least resistance, thus the most optimal strategy. So sometimes patches or characters or metas will develop that alienate certain parts of this player base. The problem at the end of everything is some people want rock paper scissors, a game that is easy to play and that you generally understand and find moderate success, while others are okay with it being chess, the sweatiest mosh pit of gaming and climbing, where only the people who have dedicated their lives will see the win screen. And the question is, who should the devs be balancing the game for? That is not something I have an answer for the devs, but to the players, the only thing I have for you is losing. See, I think what makes games fun is because people know they can lose. That even if you're so good at a game, it is so complex that you could theoretically be challenged by an opponent who has figured out something new. It is a push and pull of tension in every game that allows us to feel satisfied about overcoming a challenge. And I think this is why you don't see people consistently playing on Smurfs. Yeah, it's fun to slam people into the ground, but it's not satisfying to win knowing the competition is beneath you. As said, the power fantasy of a skill game is that your hard work paid off and you can win more. But as humans, we relish the challenge. We want to know that our hard work is in danger because proving that we can overcome the odds that are placed in front of us is what the game is all about. So if you want to keep playing your bad character, I think that's even more proof of how much better you are at the game. Or if you're playing to master its systems, then winning through counterpicking and counterplay is satisfying. It's all about knowing what you find fun in a game. See, when you pick a game to play, I think you should go into it knowing what you want to experience. And I think the experience of enjoying a game comes down to how much you enjoy that element of the game and how much losses you're okay with taking to enjoy it. For instance, with League of Legends, I enjoy the brain aspects of the game. Counter picks, outplaying bad matchups, how to properly rotate, and especially figuring out how my champion fits into the picture of the game. But with this game comes the risk of having an absolutely horrible time where you get the shit kicked out of you for 20 minutes because you, or worse, someone else on your team, made a mistake and the enemy team has snowballed out of control. Thus, the gamble is getting tilted out of your mind for 25 to 30 minutes or getting to marginally test your brain. And I personally enjoy the brain flex. But I acknowledge what could go wrong and play otherwise because I think that there are things that are fun enough to risk experiencing a bad game for. Knowing what you could lose, which is, you know, your time, your freaking mental state, and what you enjoy, and choosing to participate in a system is part of your agency as a player. So if you know a game could tilt you and that's not something you need in your life right now, you probably shouldn't do it. Because as said, the problem with competitive titles is the fact that they are skilled games. There will always be people trying to climb the ladder, and that runs counter to people who want to play games casually. As such, there's this paradox. So the most popular games right now are competitive games. They're probably popular because they're free and can run on most systems, so anyone can try them out. As such, the reason why you enjoy the game is vastly different from player to player. Just given the fact that the games are free and easy to run means there will be a large casual audience of people who want to just try to get into the game. However, competitive games are skill games. People will be optimizing. If you want to play your silly little strat or character in spite of that, go ahead. It's your experience. At the end of the day, if you're not finding success, it's a skill issue. As it stands right now, competitive video games are in a state where you can pick someone, get good at them, and succeed. But if you don't want to put in the effort to learn the game, you will lose game. And if that's not a system you want to engage with, then I think you shouldn't be playing these types of games. It'll probably save you a lot more stress in the long run, trying to eke enjoyment out of a game that is frustrating you more than anything. Because at the end of the day, you, the player, have agency. If you're not trying to go pro, or it isn't your job to play the game in some capacity, just play something you find fun. But is that it? Is the destiny of every shit character to just have to suck it up, buttercup, and lose? Maybe, but not really. The reason for this last bit is one esports title in particular, and its continued existence is kind of why I believe everything is just a skill issue. I introduced to you, perhaps, one of gaming's biggest anomalies.
Super Smash Brothers Melee!
This game is turning 24 this year. It's older than I am. As such, there's really no way it's a live service game. Everything that is possible in Melee was in the game when it came out. So all this movement tech, all this min-maxing of characters, all that from the start. And despite even Nintendo's best efforts, it's still an esports title because its players love it so much. This game is just fun. Its movement and its combos are so complex, you kind of need years to even master one character. And the thing I like about this game is the fact that its fun is a complete accident. Nintendo designed it as, you know, being a funny party game. It just so happens that Melee's development was kind of scuffed. Like, there are characters that are just straight up incomplete. Game & Watch's shield doesn't even cover this little guy. Yeah, what a sad boy. But the jank is what makes this game fun. Somehow, the scuffed code creates shit like wave dashing, making Melee one of, if not Smash's fastest titles. And that is just scratching the surface of tech in this game. But look at it, it looks so fucking cool. Look at him schmovin'. Every fun thing is almost a complete accident. But that also means this game is seemingly completely imbalanced. As said, there are characters that are completely dogshit. Pichu is intentionally bad, but characters like Roy and Game & Watch are just incomplete. Like, some of Roy's hitboxes aren't even there. So, there are these characters that are really not the best. And to show how big the disparity is, everything below like A tier has a very hard time winning major tournaments. Because on the flip side from these low tiers, we have characters like Fox. Fox is everything that people should hate about these hero games. He's literally the best character in the game by far. He has a move that comes out on frame 1, can jump cancel out of it, does combo, a random ass ranged attack, and one of the best combo games in all of Melee. He's only gated by the fact that he's hard as fuck. In our terms, Fox is a character almost equally statted in rock, paper, and scissors. Fox can do whatever he wants, whenever he wants, and win against everyone. And yet, some of Melee's top dogs don't even play Fox. Looking at Melee's top 100, you'll see a lot of Foxes. But there's a Marth at rank 1, a Sheik, a Puff, all characters above A tier. But you'll notice that there's a Yoshi, Yoshi, as of 2021, was in B tier. But if we go further back than that, you can see how Yoshi has risen from his fucking dog shit days. This green little goober is by no means a bad character, but it's nowhere near good. That is true for literally 99% of the player base. But one man is standing in the way of all of that. The legend Amza. If you want his full story, there are great videos on this fucking platform. Just go look him up. But in short terms, Amza took his shitty little low tier all the way to the top. He now can consistently place very high and even get first. This was a feat never achieved by another Yoshi player before this point. Amza mastered literally everything about Yoshi. His weird egg, his strange defensive options, his lack of a consistent grab, and it all culminates in him having the ability to win. Why did he do this? Did Amza secretly realize Yoshi was goated and spent years of his life honing this character that he figured out was the best? Nope! Amza picked up Yoshi because it was, quote, his favorite character. He slogged through the hard mode of not just playing his dude, but perfecting him so that he could be used competitively because he just wanted to. And that, to me, is the pinnacle of agency. Melee hasn't gotten an update, so no dev is coming to save us from Fox's domination. But with the players consistently pushing their game, developing new tech, and especially discovering how to maximize their other characters, that makes this so special. There are those few in the Melee community that acknowledge how cutthroat of a game Melee is, and despite that seemingly daunting challenge, work to make their characters better, because they just want to be playing their characters. The tier list will be the tier list unless someone comes along, someone like Amza, who pushes their silly little dude as far as they can go. While I do think it's an anomaly this game even was this fun, I do think it represents some sort of golden ideal for gaming, that even without a dev sport, a game is still fun enough to stand on its own, and decades later, it's still being played because its players love its system and its characters enough to keep it going. This game stands against everything we've talked about for modern games. Imbalanced characters, dogshit meta, yet the people who are fans of this game and fans of their characters acknowledge that by picking their characters, they are picking their difficulty. But a character is only bad if you stop working on it. Sure, you might never make it to the highest of the ladder with someone like Bowser because of how little he has going for him, but to me, this unchanging beauty of a game represents what people like about both chess and rock paper scissors while still being a hero game. Here's a game where both players technically have the same options, so the only thing left is skill. You can pick a character that sucks, but it has the RPS energy in the way that you can believe eventually you will win. Melee has this magical thing where since so many characters getting lifted out of their low tier jail, you can almost believe that anything is possible. That since no dev can change the game, that you'll discover some tech or some maximization or some niche playstyle that will allow you to take your little guy to the top. They have somehow achieved the belief of a game like rock paper scissors while having an impossibly high skill gap. That one day, someday, you'll be able to take your silly little guy and win it all, even if that's not really the case. To wrap it up, games have always been about choice. You can make the choice to have no choice, or you can play a game that will give you a little bit or a lot of bit of it. You even have the choice to not play a game if it's disappointed you, if its devs have let you down, or most importantly, if you're just not having fun with it anymore, you can walk away. You, as the player, choose which systems you want to engage with, so you cannot blame anyone else for choosing to boot up and press play. Yeah, we can be sad because a game had potential and something that could have been fun was wasted, but it's your choice to keep playing or not. In the end, I think a game's base systems are what make it timeless. Rock paper scissors is timeless for its ease, chess is timeless for its depth. The question is, what game of this age will people be playing decades or centuries down the line? I don't know, but whatever it is, it's gonna have to trick a lot of people into thinking that their choices matter, be it through luck with perceived skill or just a mountain load of sweaty gamers min-maxing. And remember that success is a skill game. You might say, but some people got lucky and were in the right place at the right time. Sure. But the way I see it, if you haven't been working to get that goal, you're gonna fumble the thing that you got so lucky to get. You don't just pick scissors and get a masterpiece. You keep picking it till it's enough to beat rock. That's all I gotta say. Thanks, I'll see you later. Goodbye.